Okay, welcome to our Erev Shabbat special Parashat class, Parashat Vayesse, the depth of the character of Yaakov and Rachel. The truth is, we met Yaakov Abinu last week, and we saw as a young man the famous episode with the Bechorah. But the true character demonstration of Yaakov Abinu does not really begin until this week's Parashah. And his wife, Rachel, Imenu, we completely meet her at this week's parasha. And although their first encounter was at the Be'er, at the well, in which we find a true exhibition of character that is unique and rich on both their behalves, but the scene or the episode when they first married or prior to their first marrying is one for the ages and one that we'll use to try to glean messages in terms of historic teaching of lessons by our forefathers and foremothers of character and real paradigm exhibition of the greatness of our ancestors. So here we go. What is that episode? Well, we know, of course, that famously Yaakov Abinu worked. The deal was for Laban for 7 years for the right to marry his daughter Rachel. It was a clear deal. No one disputed that that was the terms of the deal. And we know that, of course, the time came. It went by like a flash in his eyes, says the Torah. And the time came, he says, that's it. My years have been filled, and I'm going to claim my wife, which is your daughter, did he tell Lavan. So we're in Parashat Vayesse, Perek Kaftet, chapter 29, Pasuk Kaf Bet, verse 22. And the Torah describes to us as follows. Vayesof Laban et kol anshe makom vayas mishteh. He gathered the people and he made a tremendous a sabbat, a celebration, a pre-wedding celebration. And you can imagine that was Lavan was an important person. It was a prestigious family. Maybe Yaakov was known from being from a famous family, descendant of Abraham and Yitzhak. What a great feast! Now, let's just paraphrase the continuation of the story because we're familiar with it. That night, sneakily, very deceivingly, did Lavan give his daughter, his older daughter, instead of Rachel, his second daughter, his older daughter Leah to Yaakov, with great chicanery and great dishonesty. The disingenuous Lavan tricked the man into marrying the wrong woman. And he found out the next morning, and of course, Yaakov approaches him, what'd you do? Gives an excuse, and he ends up marrying Rachel. Before we get into what we can take from the character demonstration of Yaakov and Rachel, let's really look at the deceptive nature of this Lavan, because it's stunning, the truth is, and it just teaches us a little bit about evil. And the Torah is not here hinting, alluding to things. The Torah is very clear and transparent in conveying to us the message of the character of this person. Look at the first pasuk that we just read. He makes this tremendous seudah. Now, why did he do that? And by the way, when he ends up marrying Rachel, what is it, about 12 pasukim later, or less than that, he ends up marrying Rachel in pasuk lamed. So about 9 pasukim later, there's no seudah. There's no seudah, right? So was this just a celebration? Well, of course not. From Lavan's standpoint, it was a ploy. It was a ploy, but and there's a possible guesses we can take of what that ploy was. But from Yaakov's standpoint, we could only imagine that this person was absolutely disgraced. Public celebration of his impending marriage to a woman. And it ended up, and that means the town It was publicized. It was well known. There was a talk. There was an undertone. Everyone was aware of it. And the next day, indeed, he marries somebody else. That's an absolute humiliation. Lavan was looking for what? There are sources that tell us and give us some insight to the fact that having a public Saudah beforehand would put Yaakov in a position that he wouldn't, come out and dispute. He wouldn't come out and challenge afterwards. And so Lavan is really, although in our first encounter with him, we saw some deception by the well, but this is very blatant. And of course, when he afterwards is confronted by Yaakov, he does what dishonest people do, which is you see nowadays it's done all the time by the media and others who deceive us. He flips it around. He instead blames. He becomes the victim, right? No, he said. Yaakov said, "Lama rimitani? Why would you so dishonest, disingenuous?" Lavan said, "Pasuk kavav lo yaseh ken b'mkomenu atata tza'ira fnei bichra." What are you trying to pull one over on me? He tells Yaakov. Yaakov now he's on the defense. How did he just become on the defense now? Right? That's the clever ploy and the strategy that is employed by those that are dishonest and manage to change the entire perception of things, and ended up making a deal out of it and getting 7 more years of work out of this man. So this person is a lowlife, Lavan, and the Torah is not mincing words about it. And that helps us with the contrast, his daughter and his son-in-law, in terms of the absolute opposite of their character. So let's look into that. I want to first look at Rachel. So let's look at some of these Pesukim. Let's go back to them now. So it says in Pasuk, this is after the feast, Pasuk Kav Gima, Vahi Ba'erev, Vayikach Le'ah Bito. In the evening, he took, who's he? Lavan, took his daughter Le'ah. And by the way, some say, the Or Hayim says, maybe there's an implication there. Vayikach is not necessary terminology of forcefully bringing her. And she resisted possibly. So now we want to be put in such a position to deceive her sister, but he pushed her into it. And it says, Vayabe otah elav, vayabo eleha. Vayabe otah elav. Also very, what does that mean? Vayabe otah elav. This is a very private thing. What is he carried into the bed? He brought her to him. But the answer quite possibly is yes. And Or HaChaim picks up on this as well, that he was so active in making sure that she was placed there. He didn't, by the way, normally there would be, often in marriages, historically going back to just centuries ago, there'd be a messenger who would present the woman, who would accept the woman. Wasn't done so directly, but he took it in his own hands and he delivered her personally, possibly when it was already nightfall, possibly to a certain location, so that it would not be detected. Vayabe otah elav. Took it into his own hands. This entire this strategy of deception, and then of course the next pasuk is Vahi ba'erev, vayikach le'ah bito. I'm sorry, that we just read that. Vahi ba'erev. The next pasuk is Vayiten laban lad zilpah shifhato le'ah bito shifha. Very curious pasuk. He gave his maidservant over to Leah, and we'll get back to this, which is, her name was Zilpah, as like a wedding gift. Okay, that was not uncommon. But what in the world is this pasuk doing here, in between the pasuk of him being with Leah and the next pasuk, which is Vahi baboker, and it was in the morning? I'm sure that she wasn't awarded her as a shivha overnight, right? Vahi ba'erev, at night she was with Yaakov. 2 pasukim later, Vahi baboker, he woke up. Who is this person? And in between, we're told that the shivha was given to her, right? But that possibly was the entire deception. Hachamim actually tell us that Bilhah was older than Zilpah, and Bilhah should have gone to the older daughter. Um, and perhaps this was the part of the entire setup, giving the younger maidservant in advance, showing that you have nothing to worry about. Of course, you're going to get Rachel, and that was part of the package of deception and the strategy that took Yaakov completely off guard and misled him, possibly. It's a very misplaced pasuk. In any case, and he finds out it's the wrong person. Now, I'll get back to the continuation because I'm going to focus on Yaakov in a moment. Let's talk about Rachel. So here the pasuk says, and this is Rashi brings a famous midrash. It says, "Vahi baboker v'hinei hile'ah." In the morning, and behold, it was the person that he was the wrong person from his perspective, not the ones that he thought he was with. Can you imagine? The night before, it was Le'ah. Vahi baboker, says Rashi, Ava balayla, but the night before, lo hayta Le'ah, it wasn't Le'ah. What does that mean? And he brings the famous Gemara, Masechet Megillah, Lefi Shemasar Yaakov Simanim L'Rachel, because there was a code system, and Yaakov was not so trusting of Lavan, and he gave this code system to Rachel. He discussed it with her in advance. When Rachel saw that there was her sister that was being set up to be with Yaakov, Amra Akshav Techalem Machuti, she'll be embarrassed. Amda Masra Tasimanim. So she taught her what the code system was. Now, how do Hachamim know that took place? Well, I'm going to ask you a question, rhetorically. Think about this for a moment. Rachel, where was she in this picture? Rachel obviously knew, because she wasn't being escorted to the house, to the room with Yaakov. She knew that something's going on. There's something wrong. This marriage is not taking place. And then, of course, she was privy to her sister being brought. What we do know about Rachel is that she made a decision to remain dead silent. She could have blown it. She wasn't in prison. And this was her life that essentially was being undermined, right? This was an absolute kidnap of her dreams. And who knows what was going to be her fate and destiny. She'd know she was going to eventually marry Yaakov. And at this moment, what we do know is that this woman could have spoken up, and she decided to stand down. And she did not open her mouth. So whether or not there was a code system or some other measure that she could have taken, in other words, she could have just let Leah fall into the trap and be discovered, or some other system. The point of Hachamim is that her passiveness, her silence was deafening. Her passiveness was incredibly active, that she made a decision. She came to a conclusion that it's better for me at this point in time to sacrifice my future possibly than to disgrace my older sister. And therefore she stood down, she remained silent, and she allowed this to go on. Now, Hachamim take it a step further and said that, she really was active in showing her how not to be embarrassed and to make sure that this really went through the right way. And it's just an amazing demonstration of perspective, of maturity, of character, of willingness to forego your own fortune, not to risk the absolute embarrassment and disgrace of not just someone else, of your sister. What power that took, what self-sacrifice, what incredible act that was. And a little bit later, and we'll come back to this pasuk, but I'll just jump for a moment. When he eventually married Rachel, it says in pasuk Lamed that Vayehab gamet Rachel mile'ah, and he loved Rachel from, it sounds like, more than Leah, the Kli Akar gives a possible perush that Mile'ah actually means from Leah, from the incident of Leah, did he love Rachel. Vayehav gamet Rachel, from what he learned about the incident of Leah. In other words, that's just added to the great impression that Yaakov had of Rachel. Look at this woman who was willing to self-sacrifice. Okay, but I want to focus on Yaakov Avinu. Let's get back to where we were. We were in Pasuk Kav Gimel. We were in Pasuk Kav Gimel. So he gets deceived, and it says in Pasuk Kav He, Vahi baboker v'hinehi le'ah. And he tells Lavan, of course, he does what his father and his grandfather did. He confronts the evil. And he told Lavan, Mazot asita li alo b'rachel abati amach. I worked for her for 7 years. Lama mitani. Why are you deceiving me? Why are you deceiving me? So look at Yaakov Abinu. It's interesting that it says in Pasuk, both in Pasuk Kaf Gimel and in Pasuk Kaf He, Vahi baboker. We know this word, Vahi, when it introduces a story, Vahi bimeh shepot hashofetim, Vahi ra'av ba'aretz, right? Vahi bimeh hashverosh, hua hashverosh. Hachamim tell us Vahi is introducing something unfortunate, sometimes even tragic. Look at this incident, what it was potentially going to be for Yaakov Avinu. What a devastation in his life. How did Yaakov Abinu handle such an incident? What was his role in this incident? So Yaakov didn't get out of hand, but he confronted Shechet directly. And he was given a choice by Lavan. You can work 7 more years, well, that's it, your dreams are over. And of course, he took the deal. But in doing so, he really demonstrated to us his character. First of all, how didn't Yaakov Abinu, how did he get duped? How didn't he realize things? How in the world can you be with a woman that you weren't anticipating being with and not know? This is something that's beyond really out the comprehension of the way we function. Because the way we function is that let's try to be as not as direct as possible, but you're with a woman, you see a woman, you desire a woman. The actual act with the woman is something that a man takes pleasure in, and he's obviously experiencing something. This person, Yaakov, obviously, he teaches us that Radak says, he even teaches us the halakha that you're supposed to be with your wife in the dark. He was obviously in a position where he didn't allow himself to see a thing. And this is what the woman that he thought he was going to be with, Rachel. There was no communication, obviously. He didn't say a word. If he said one word, he would have known. If he heard one word, he would have known. This was not defensive. This was his real routine. This was the first time he was doing this. This is his real conduct. No seeing, no talking, no asking, right? And it wasn't until there was actually light that he had any way of, if she would have walked out in the middle of the night, he would have never found out, right? This was the act of holiness. And this is not abstention, that's Christianity, God forbid. The Jewish people indulge in procreation and relations, obviously. But this was the way a holy man approached the act of relations with the opposite sex in an absolute, revered, timid, holy, limited, disciplined manner. That's Kiddusha. The Rambam's book of Kiddusha has 2 subjects in it, kashrut and illicit relations, right? Because the separation, Kedoshim Yihu, says the Hashem commanding us in Vayikra. And the first Rashi, she says Kedoshim is Pirushim, means separate from improper relationships. That's the real height of Kedusha, to be so disciplined with purity. We see from our father Yaakov. And even though Vahi, This was really tragic to him. How did he rebound from? How did he rebound? This is the way he rebounded. He makes the deal. I have no choice. I'll take it. 7 more years, but only 1 more week till he got married. He had to work 7 years. 1 more week. Shabu Azot till he married Rahel. What happens? Let's get back to that pasuk. Pasuk kaftet. Pasuk lamed. It says, "Vayabo gam el Rachel, vayehab gam et Rachel milea." 2 gams. Gams also, and he had relations with Rachel, and he loved also Rachel from Leah. Now, the truth is that here it says, it sounds like that he loved Rachel more than Leah, but he loved Leah as well. The truth is that the Midrash tells us that Yaakov wanted a divorce Leah because he was so upset at her. And we see when they have just a few Pesukim later, when she has the first children, she exclaims and names the child because that I'm hated, so to speak. But we know that's only a relative term. The Mepharshim tell us she wasn't hated by Yaakov, but he had ill feelings, and compared to Rachel, Leah felt that she was in the doghouse, right? And eventually that developed and that changed, and genuine, true, authentic love grew between them. But even though there was ill feelings, but the pshat of this pasuk is Vayehab gam. That word gam, that second word also in the pasuk is definitely extraneous. Gam et Rachel milea, even though we gave you a nice pirush of what milea could have meant before, but the pshat of this is that he loved Rachel also from Leah. Why throw in the word also? Because it demonstrates that he found a way to love Leah. After all of this, the disappointment, the disgrace, the embarrassment, the vahi, a devastating time in his life. Once this happened, Yaakov Avinu gathered himself. And what did he become conscious of? He became conscious of the fact that if this happened, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed this to happen. He allowed this to happen. This happened to me because this was supposed to happen to me. Yes, Lavan is evil. Yes, I question, Leah's role in this. But God set me up in this situation. And if God set me up in this situation, let me recalibrate now. And let me not just, sometimes we sob and we get down and we can't get beyond something, a relationship, something really wronging us. He quickly had a full picture. His perspective was locked in immediately. This is a few days ago this happened. And immediately he understood that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants me here. If he wants me here, let me pick myself up and freshen now my view on things. Here is in front of me another righteous woman. And she deserves love because she's now my wife. And I understand that I'm going to build Am Yisrael from this person as well. And therefore the pasuk throws in that word gam. Vayehav gam et Rachel milea. Yes, he loved her more, but he also loved Leah. That is the point of this extra word. And Yaakov Avinu does things in these group of Pesukim that are for us almost not human. He was human, of course. The humans can make error. But to us, they're not, because these are almost expected human error in these type of situations. Yet the discipline and the refinement of his character, his perspective, relationship to God, of course, was something astonishing. And yet for us, he's our father, Yaakov Avinu. He modeled his greatness for us. And our first glimpse really into the depth of the purity of our father, Yaakov Avinu, and our mother, Rachel Imenu. Amen. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.